What's up YouTube? This is Stan from Stanley G Tech, and today we're gonna have yet another tutorial of object-oriented programming in Java. And today we're gonna cover a couple things that I haven't been covering before in my channel. And but to start with, let's start our program here, and let's bring up the assignment that we have to do for today. So we're gonna write a program called test scores. We're gonna write actually the class called test scores, and we're gonna write it with exceptions. Well, I'm gonna talk about what the exception is. Let's read the assignment first and see if there is anything else we need to talk about. So write a class named test scores. The class constructor should accept an array of test scores as its argument. The class should have a method that returns the average of the test scores. If the test score in the array, another array, we see that is negative or greater than 100, the class should throw an illegal argument exception. Demonstrate the class in a program called testscoresDemo.java. So pretty much we're given a program to test our class with. Alright, so have you noticed anything that we haven't talked about on this channel? Of course, the first thing we notice is exception. The second thing we noticed was array. Now, since this is a data structure class, array is one of the collections. Actually, array is one of the data. What is a data structure? Let's talk about what is data structure, in case you're wondering what it is all about. So think about your office, and think about your things in the office that you need. So you need you need a place for document storage. You need a place for different what we call it, miscellaneous storage, like pencils, pens, pins, whatever else you might need. You need some other storage places to store multiple items, right? So we all know how to store this, how to store a single item by now, right? So you give it you store it in a container in memory, right? And you give it its data type. So you write on a container what is inside the container. So if it's, in our case, if it's integers, you write int. If it's double, you write double. If it's a string, you write string. If it's a character, you write character. So that would hold one object, one particular object. So if you say string first name, it's going to contain the first name, right? String last name, it's going to contain only the last name. Int age, it's going to contain the age. Int year born, or something like that, right? So it's going to contain one thing. But what if you want to contain a collection of objects? Well, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about data structure, data structures, we're talking about the collections. Now, one of the data structures that we can hold items in is called an array. So think of array as a bookshelf or a box with the different sections, right? So let's say you want to get a box, and in that box you store documentation, right? So imagine you have a big drawer, right? Probably you have seen those drawers before. You pull it out and then you have sections where you store the files, right? So you have a section and it'll say bills, bills, and you have a bunch of paperwork in there. Then you have another section, it will say another type of paperwork, right? It will say like invoices. Then you have invoices in there. Then it will be, so basically that would be a drawer. The whole drawer would have a name of paperwork. So once you open that drawer, you can go into each individual cell and see what's inside of it, right? And you can count, okay, in this paper drawer I have 10 cells or so and so forth. That's basically what the array is. That's basically what the array represents. So Another way to think about the array, that would be like a thing if you think about the bookshelf. So you have a shelf with different books, and you just you have a couple actual shelves, right, in the book storage place, and you store books in there. So you can store first shelf could be history books, second shelf would be math books, third shelf would be like, I don't know, story books or something like that, but it will be all of the same type of books, right? So basically that's what we're gonna do here. So it says that we need to store the scores. Now, why would you use an array instead of like saying student Brian, for example, his score is this one, Brandon this one, Matthew this one, Jacob that one, I don't know, Christina this one, Kate this one. That will be a lot of writing. I mean, it's possible. You can do that, but it will be complicated in coding. It will be really complicated. Rather than taking one box, storing all of those students, and storing all of those scores. In our case, we only store scores, right, in those cells, and then we can manipulate them. We can go through them. We can count the average, and that's what we're gonna do in this program, right? And it's gonna make our life easier, right? So the second thing we're going to talk about actually is an exception. What is an exception? Exception is a way to provide a program, to make a program not to crash. Because if the program will not have outcome due to the wrong entry or something didn't work, it will just simply crash. Now, do you want your programs to crash? No. So for this purpose, we use something that's called exceptions. And there are different types of exceptions. And this one, we will use a legal argument. Which one is it? Illegal argument exception. So pretty much, imagine you writing a, you're writing a, some kind of calculator, some kind of program where the user makes some you're writing some kind of program for the user, and you know that the user should know how to use this program, and that, for example, in the field first name they should type the name, right? Or they should, in let's say in the field credit card number, they should type a number of the specific credit card. Like if it's a Visa card, it's certain numbers, certain groups, right? If it's a American Express, it could be certain digit long and so forth, right? But imagine the user misses a digit and the program has no idea how to handle it. It will crash or give you the wrong result, right? So to avoid that, you write an exception. So basically, the exception is a way to check whether or not the program is doing what it's supposed to do and the users are doing what they're supposed to do, right? So if the user doesn't give the right input, for example, the program is simply going to say, oh, okay, sorry, wrong entry, please try again, So that's the way with the exceptions. So now, let's go through our program. So first is the thing that we all done before, is creating class, name it test scores. So I'm going to actually show, since I created this, I think, program already right here, and I made a mistake in there, I'm going to actually show to you how you remove a program, right? So how do you actually delete a program? So not the program, I mean the project. So to delete the project, you simply go to your I think it's in you can go to File Explorer, but I'll go straight to Documents, I think. So if you open up Documents, open up the Documents folder. I think it's in Documents. Documents, or actually, hold on one second. So downloads, no, Documents. Yes, Documents. Now you have NetBeans. Then you have your folder here, test scores, and you just delete it. And then you just restart your NetBeans just to make sure that it's gone. Start in admins, and then now it should allow you to create a completely new project. And we call this one test scores. That will create us a class named test scores, right? So then we remove this portion. We don't need the main program. Now we'll start by declaring the variables, right? Declaring fields, attributes. Okay, so when we start thinking about, okay, so we need an array. Basically, it doesn't say the class needs a field of array that will contain the test scores, right? You should already know that a class would need some kind of field to store some things about the object that you're trying to create, right? So in this case, we need test scores. Now, yet we need an array. So there are a couple ways to actually let the computer know that you're declaring an array, not the single object, but an array actually, the collection. Well, first of all, the array is this symbol right here. This is the array, right? So 2 square brackets. That's gonna show the computer or memory or whatever. That's gonna show that you're storing the array in memory. That's gonna show the computer that you're storing the array in memory, right? But now, what are you gonna do to actually store any item? So you have to give it a data type, right? So arrays, as well as any objects, they have data types. So our array will contain test scores. Now, test scores are not integers, right? They're doubles, floats. That could be anything. But in our case, let's make it a double. So, and again, we of course have to still use the access modifiers. In this class, since this is not the class that we're going to inherit from, as we did in the last project, in this class, we're just simply creating a single class, right? A single base class, a super class, if you want to call it, right? If you want to call it that way, right? So we will do it private. We will do private. Now, so once we use the word private, now, as I said, there are different types of declaring an array. Not declaring an array, actually different types. Yeah, declaring, well, I call it declaring an array, but in details, I would say there are different types of putting the data inside the array. So if you know how many cells your array will have, right? So, for example, the description of the program will say, the class has 10 students. Now you need to calculate the average score for those 10 students. So you already know, so I have to have a drawer, right, a box with 10 cells because there's going to be 10 test scores. So in this case, you will declare the array like this. So of course, the modifier, right, access modifier will be private. Then you give it a data type, as usual, will be double. Then you'll say, okay, what is gonna do? What is it gonna have? It's gonna be what is it gonna be? It's gonna be an array, right? So that's signed the array. Now you have to give it a name. Okay, it's array, but what is it gonna score? What is it gonna store? So you give it a name, right? Test scores. Right. All right. So since you know there are 10 students, for example, you know that there are 10 students, you have to since this is an array thing, the array is already a class somewhere stored in Java class library, right? It already knows that it's an array, but you need to create a copy of that one. So you need to create an instance of that. So you create a new, as usual, you use keyword new, then say new double, new box, right? New box. And you say, okay, this is an array also. Okay. And then you're going to say inside of here, you're going to say, okay, there are 10 cells. All right. So you created a new array with 10 cells in there. Now, let's suppose You want to hard code the scores inside of it. You don't want to give it 10 cells. You want to hard core for some reason you decide to, right? So in this case, what you want to do is this. You want to leave this 10 out. You want to come here. I think it's either or. I think you give it a curly braces inside of this. Hold on, let me see. Curly braces. And then it's either inside or outside. So I'll check. I'll just, for example, you give 12, comma 2, comma 34, comma 55, comma 65. Yeah. Yeah, actually, I think. Oh. Let it be 23, not 2, but 23. Alright, I think you, do it like this. Let's try it. Okay, it's not that. Okay, so if it's not that, you take it outside. I think you take it outside, yeah. So I'll cut it out. Oh, so cut it out, and I'll put it next to the array. Right. And of course, this is not the string, so I'll have to remove that. All right. So yeah, like that. Yeah, I had to remember that. So, anyways, so what we did right now. We did array. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Array of 5 cells with test scores, 5 test scores for 5 students, for example. If you need 10, you just put comma and add 10 of them. Now this is hard coded. This will work just fine. But in our case, here's the thing. In our case, we don't know how long the array is. We don't know how many students. It's just a test scores array. So you need to create basically a default program for that works for any amount of students, right? All right. So in this case, what you do, you just use this. So basically, you say private double array of test scores. So you don't know how many test scores it's going to be. You have no clue how many, right? So you just say, it's just an array of test scores. Okay, so you created that. Now the next thing, we need a constructor, right? So you write your constructor. And it should take the test scores as an argument. All right, so you write public test scores. Remember that the object's name that you're trying to build is the same thing as a class name. Now, why do you need a constructor? So pretty much here you describe an object. You describe it, right? You say, I want to have I want to have a program called test scores that will have this and this and this and this and this. And now you're saying, all right, so I want to have this. Now the computer knows I have to have this. Now I'm actually building the actual object, the actual program. So I'm building the public test scores so that I can call it and use it as a data type, right? So public or object type. So public test scores, and as usually the signature of the method. Hold on 1 second, just making sure. Brackets. Okay, public test scores, and you want to give it a argument, right? So you want to give it a test scores array as a argument. So you say double test scores, right? I have to type right. There we go. And now it's fixed. You want to make sure you're typing right. So you give it a double array of a test scores. So now you need to initialize it. So you need to set it up, all right? So you need to know, you need to set up the memory in the computer, all that good stuff. So as usual, do this dot test scores. It already knows that it's array, so you don't have to say it's an array again, right? And then equals test scores. All right. So now that you said that, right? So next thing you want to do is you want to write a method. You don't need accessor and mutator because you just built an array. The test scores are going to be still public. You didn't declare the test scores as a test score for student 1, test score for student 2. So it's going to access that box automatically. So whatever you put in, whatever you load into that box is going to store. So the box itself is private, it's protected, but the scores could change. So today you can use scores for math class, tomorrow you can use the scores for like any other class. So different teachers might want to use this program differently. So you don't need to specify, accessor and mutator. All right, so pretty much what you do here is so we need to write a method, it says, that throws an exception, right? The class should also have a method that returns the average of the test scores. If any test score is in the array is negative or, now keep in mind that little word or, that helps a lot in writing a program, or greater than 100, the class should throw an legal argument exception, demonstrate blah blah blah. You know that, right? Keep in mind that or. That comes handy. I'll show you where. All right. So since you have, so this is the key. Since you have a demo, I can't talk today. I don't know why. Since you have a demo program, you might want to sneak peek inside and see what method they call to do that. So you go into your test scores, and you see which method they call get average. So you want to match that. Okay, so you want to call that little method get average. So of course this is going to be a public. This is going to be a double. Get average. You're not passing any arguments in here. All right. So now you think, all right, so what do I want the logic to be? Well, since I'm calculating the average, how do I calculate the average? So average is calculated by summing all the items in the array and then dividing it by number of cells, right? So number of items. So basically, simple math, right? All right, so in this case, since you're going to do those operations, you need to use some variables to store that data. So the first one is going to be double total, and then don't forget to initialize it to 0 because the program is going to complain. So you set it to 0. All right, then you need to another double. That's going to be called average or result, whatever you want it to call, and you also want to set it to 0. So now what you pretty much did, you're going to store total, so you're going to sum the objects in the array, sum them up. Then the second action would be actually to divide them. So the average would be total divided by number of array cells. Now, next thing you read that you need to have a method that throws an exception. So how do you declare a method that throws in exceptions? Really simple. You go back to the signature, the method signature, the top line, right? And you say throws illegal argument exception. Exactly, give it the exact exception name, right? That's it. You declared the exception. Now the computer knows that this method would have an exception in there that it has to handle, right? So now You think about it. Okay, so I have this. So how do I want it to throw the exception? I need to check if my calculation, or if the data entered is incorrect somewhere. I need the program to stop and give it a, or not to stop, or give it some kind of notification to a user that, hey, it's not calculating correctly. Something is wrong with your entry. Please check your entry or whatever, right? Else, if everything is working fine, the program should just do its thing. What it's supposed to do. Calculate, and everything. So, you can even add the break to it. You can even break the code by adding the break. But since you don't want the program to break, in this case, if you want it to break, right, you put it a break. But if you don't want it to break, just give it a run, right? So let's do it both ways. Let's do it with break and without the break and see what happens. All right, so you think about, you need to go through the cells. So you need to look into each of the, let's say, 10 students, right? You need to go into pick in each of them and see what scores they got, right? What score did each individual of the students got, right? Yeah. So how do we do this? We need something that repeats over and over and over and over again and goes through automatically and sees this cell, then this cell, then that cell, then that cell, then that cell, then that cell. Then calculates all together and divides them, and boom, we got the score, average score. Does it ring the bell? Of course, we're going to use the loop, right? So, of course, again, you want a method to calculate the average score. All right. So we need the loop. We need the for loop. So basically, again, what the for loop is, you're saying for some integer I, which is going to be a counter for the amount of times the loop will run. If that I is less than, if it's less than, let me give it some more space. If it's less than the array itself, right? So how do we say, okay, if it's less than the array, whatever the array size is. So how do we say that? We say that if it's less than the array name, which is test scores, dot length, right? And it even gives you a clue. That's why I say use NetBeans. It's easy to see and it's easy to program. So basically, you're saying if it's less than the length of the array, whatever the length of the array might be, we don't know. It was not told to us, right? So if it's less than, it's gonna run the code inside the curly brackets, right? It's gonna run the code, but then once it ran the code successfully, it's gonna update our I. So it's gonna set the counter to 1 in this case, right? So it's gonna 0. So I is equaling to 0. I missed that, right? So I is initially 0. So if I, which is 0 right now, is less than the length amount, the array length, is going to execute the code in the curly brackets or curly braces, right? Then it's going to come back. If everything runs smoothly, it's going to update the I. So now it's going to say, since I is 1 and 1 is still less than the array.length, it's going to execute the code again, update the I. Now I is 2, so if 2 less than, so this is just basically the amount of time the amount of times the loop should run. So now, what will go inside the loop? As I said, we're gonna think about it. So we're gonna put that exception somewhere. So we're gonna say if. And remember how in the assignment it gives us a clue? If any test score in the array is negative or greater than 100. So how do we say that here? If our array, so we just test score. So if at any index in our array, our test score is either negative or greater than 100. So how do we say that? So we need to show that we're checking the array, right? Test score, we're checking the array. And inside of here, since we have the integer that can calculate at that, so first I is going to be 0, second I is going to be 1, third I is going to be, the I's I'm talking about, right? This I. So it's going to go through I. Okay, it's 0. Is this? All right, is this correct? Okay, this is correct. Okay, we're going to run this. Next I, boom. I is 1. Okay, still this meets the criteria. Okay, let's check. At I equals 1, we have negative 2. Oops, that's not acceptable. I'm sorry. Oops, this is the mistake. So the program somehow gives the exception, right? But this is how we go through the array. So we give it an I inside of it. So basically we're saying at index at I, at that cell, at the first cell of the array, currently 0, right? At first cell of the array, if the entry is normal, it goes through. If the entry is incorrect, it gives the error message, right? So, hold on. All right. So, if the test score, if the index at I of the test score array is less than 0, since it's negative, right? Less than 0. So result of less than 0. Now, or, right? Not and, but or. That will make a difference. Or, same thing, test score at our index I. Huh? What? Huh? What? At our index I, right? Or if it's greater than 100, okay, if it's greater than 100, all right, we're gonna check test score. All right, so we said if the entry at index I, which is 0, right, the cell number 0, if an entry in cell 0 in our array test score is greater than less than 0, or the entry at 0 in our test score array is greater than 100, then we're gonna throw an exception. So we just basically say that throw a new, and we'll give it the name of the exception. All right, we'll give it a name of the exception, which is gonna be what is it? Throw a new illegal argument exception. Okay, and now in the parentheses, you want to give it an error message. So what do you want it to say? Oh, incorrect entry. Incorrect entry. Or you can give it incorrect entry. Then you can say please enter a no, you say this the score cannot be a negative I don't know what just happened. Negative number. And it can not be greater than 100. Alright, so you basically give it an error message. I probably accidentally ran the code, so don't pay attention to this. So we said, pretty much what we said is, if this is the case, right? If this is the case, if this is the mistake that they've done, it's going to throw a new exception with this error message. Now, else if everything is fine, it's going to execute the code. Now we need to think, okay, how do we calculate? So we have two our variables here, right? Average and total. So how do we calculate the average of the test score? So we need to say total. You can say total equals total plus every single element of the array, right? So this I is called the element, right? So you show in other words of this thing, another explanation, correct explanation, of a programmer will say, if the element of the array at I is less than 0, or the element of the array at I is greater than 100. But I explained it so you can understand. If at cell 0, if the score which user entered is either negative or is greater than 100, then the computer is gonna yell at them, right? Else, else is gonna be total plus equals what are we doing? So total equals total plus plus the elements of each element of the array. So right. So our thing is called test score. Test scores at I. So so we said here. So total would be equal total plus each element of the array. So it's gonna loop through the first element added, second element added. So element at 0 added, element at 1 will added, element at 2, and so forth, right, until the end of the array. Now the second action would be, the second step would be, we need the average, right? So average is going to be equal. So now since we know the total, right, it's going to calculate us the total. So average will be equal, we need to divide that total by the cells in the array, right? By the amount of students, for example, amount of scores, whatever. So how do we say that? So average is going to be equal in total divided by, how do we now say, okay, the amount of cells? Well, we just did it in here, didn't we? So this is going to be our array, which is test scores dot length. So the length of that thing, right? Now it's a method. This is not the void method. So this is the method with the actual return thing. So the program is going to complain, and if you see in the NetBeans, it's visible here, that particularly here, it says you need to return stuff, right? So at this point, we should return the average, right? So we calculated everything. I'm not sure if this is the correct spot. Could be above that. Yes, that's above that. So we need to place it in here. Yeah. So basically, you need to place it outside this. uh, outside that loop. Outside that loop, yes, correct. So basically, what we said, we did the for loop, right? Did the for loop. We said if test score, we check to make sure that data is correct. If the data is not correct, we're gonna throw this illegal argument exception with the message, right? Else, we're gonna calculate it. So we're gonna say total equals total plus test score array element, all the elements. So we're gonna add the elements. So we're gonna add the elements of the array to it, right? So the average is going to be total divided by test scores dot length. So the length of the array, how many cells are there, we divide it by that amount of cells. And we return the average. So we need the average out of this method, right? If we want to break, let's try actually to break to say, okay, if this doesn't work, then we need to put the break in there, right? So let's actually try to break this. Let's see if it's gonna work. Don't be afraid to try things, okay? Don't quite remember how to break the code. Let's see. It's easy to do. We just go back. How to break out of a loop. In Java. Java break. Yeah. And just if break, just the word break. Okay, so just the word break inside the curly braces. Okay, cool. So if this is the case, right? If this is the case, then we're gonna break in here. For some reason it doesn't want to take it. Unreachable statement for some reason. Maybe right here. No. Oh, I have to go back. I have to remember that break, guys. Hold on. Okay, break. Oh, it's before the... Okay. Alright. Makes sense. That's before the exception. Let's not worry about it. Who cares? Let's not worry about it. We can figure it out later. We're not gonna waste our time on this. So basically, we just wrote our thing. Okay, we don't have to use break at all. I would say not to use. Don't worry about it. So basically, this is what we did, right? Again, this is what we did. We wrote an if statement. We're looping through the array, right? Checking each individual element of the array. If it doesn't meet the requirement, right, we throw an exception with this error message. Else, if everything is correct, right? We do the operation and return our result, which is average. So this completes the class, right? So now let's use the class within the program and see what it does. So now remember to enter the main program. If you are given the main program and you wrote the class word, you have to the main program file has to be in the same package. If it's in a different package, the program will not simply see it. So you need to add a file to this package, which is our test scores, right there up top, and you need to create a main program, Java main class, right? And name it test score demo. I think it is, right? Test scores demo.java. So test scores demo. Now you don't have to write .java. It will do it for you. Okay. I mean you can, but it's gonna create the file anyways for you. Once you click in the NetBeans, once you click, if you're writing in JGraphs, you might want to say .java, but in this one, it's just gonna correct itself. You'll see how. So you remove. No, you don't remove this. You remove only this, right? You don't need that. And then you go back to your program, which is right here. And then you copy everything that's post those curly brackets. The first and the last one, make sure, no, the first, the second, and the pre-last one. So you're only copying the code. Copy it carefully. So you have to leave two up top, curly braces, two curly braces up top, two curly braces at the bottom. Then you copy, and then you close that, and then you paste, right? And then look, no issues whatsoever. So let's run the program and see what it does. So it says test score class won't find the test score project. Select the main class. Okay, so yeah, it has to be .java. So it's gonna just fix it for you, and voila. Invalid score found. So it gives you right away that the invalid score is found, right? So incorrect entry. The score cannot be, and it gives the instructions what to do. So if you want to correct it, you go back to your array, and you see it has 100 here, 109, 100. It has 101. So of course it violates the first one. So the average of the good score, the good score has no issues. But should the good score had an issue, it would give the same problem to the good score. So let's run this and see what it's gonna do. So now it threw the exception 2 times, as you see. It says, okay, the things are incorrect here and here. So, oops, correct your entry. So if you correct your entry, both cases, right? If you correct the entry in both cases, it should give you the correct information. Now you got the correct information in both cases, right? So, but apparently it's the same. It's the same answer because the array is the same thing, right? But should you say this one is going to be, instead of 100, let's put, I don't know, 50, 60, 64. That would be different, right? So and that completes our thing. That completes our assignment. So as you saw, it was pretty easy to do once you understand exactly what you need to do. Once you know how to declare the array, going back to our test score array, test score class. Once you know, okay, that you need first the description of the class, which is going to be your, the array. It's going to contain the array of objects. In fact, you can store objects inside the array too. Like if you store the flower, for example, the flower might have a price, it might have a kind of a flower, so you can store that in the array as well. So that would be the array type flower. That will not be the array type flower kind, flower type, or flower price. You can create those two arrays, but then you have to match them. But you can create a single array that just holds the whole entire object of flower, which comes with price and flower type. In other words, in the same array, you can only contain the same objects of the same data type. It cannot contain objects of different. So you cannot contain in the same array. You cannot contain the paperwork, and then you cannot contain in the same array cars or computers or something like that. No, it has to be. If you want to contain that in one array, then you have to say office items or something. I don't know, the array of office items. And you build your objects inside the array. You say, okay, in each element of this array is going to contain computers. So basically the office items, so computers, printer paper, printer, office chair, office furniture. So you give it in one cell, you put one type, in another cell, you put the other. So in other words, you have, let's say, 5 offices, right? And you say, okay, office items. So each office item, if each office package is going to contain a couple items in there. So that would be the good thing to store it in the array. And the exception is simply throwing in the error message to the user that, so you give a program, give a loop, or give a program a way to handle the incorrect entry to promote the program from not resulting in incorrect calculation, an incorrect result or anything, or the worst case, so that the program would not crash. You give it a exception that will simply handle all those incorrect mistakes that people, incorrect entries that people make, all those mistakes that people make, not crash, but give them the way to correct and fix the program. So anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful. And if you have questions, then don't forget to leave comments, and don't forget to click that notification bell to see when the new videos come up. And I'm here for you. If you have any questions, you can write me and text me and leave me a comment, and I'll reply.